Broadcasting from the Symphony studio in Marietta, Georgia, it's time for the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. Tune in every week as we spotlight the very best minds in our industry. Now, here are your hosts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. In this series, we speak with and learn from the top thought leaders in the property technology space. I am one of your hosts, the marketing manager here at Symphony, Katie Galley, and I am, of course, as always, joined by our president of the Internet of Things division, Trey Gaskins. How are you doing, Trey?
I'm doing great. How are you, Katie? Thanks for putting the show together today.
Yeah, super excited, Trey. We're going to have a really great episode today. I'm excited to dive in. So with us in our Symphony studio today, we have the Vice President of Smart Source Resident Technology Services at RealPage Incorporated, Henry Pye. How are you doing, Henry?
Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for stopping by and just sharing your story with us today. Really excited to dive in. So, Henry, can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey and how you got the job that you have today?
It's fair to say it was not planned. I finished graduate school thinking I was going to be a securities litigator. The division I was going to disappeared as a result of an acquisition. I happened to mention to a family friend that I liked building sandcastles as a child. And I then became a management trainee for a company known as JPI, who at the time built more multifamily communities than anyone else in the nation. I was a management trainee for them for 4 years, and then began to gravitate into the technology challenges facing JPI developments and then other third-party developers, and eventually developed a team who in 2009 moved over to RealPage.
Wow. And so in that development of the team, were you a founding member of RealPage then? Was it your company?
No. RealPage is, I'm not even sure how many thousands of employees, around 8,000 employees in as many or more countries. You know, it specializes in software as a service for the rental housing industry.
Okay.
Throughout the world. We are a small consulting group who work directly with owners, developers, managers on the technology issues facing their residents.
Gotcha. And so when you came in, did you go right into the Vice President of Smart Source Resident Technology Services, or how did you kind of get your start?
Have changed a little bit, the team members a little bit over time, but essentially we've been doing the same thing for the last decade.
Yeah. So Henry, I brag about some of our clients that we both work with, and I'll be asking some of them, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, or here's where we're headed, and many of the clients will say, that sounds pretty good, but let me check with Henry Pye before we go any further. And so I want to get one of these days the status of, let me check with Trey, and then if Trey says it's okay, we'll go ahead and move forward. But tell the audience, just in your capacity as a technologist and kind of a low voltage for what your company does, but what does your division specifically do in the property tech arena?
For existing sites and developments, we generally have 4 focus areas: voice, video, data, negotiations and design, access control, and CCTV, including unit locks. Third is audio video, and the fourth is IoT or smart community. If there's been a change in the last couple years, it's increasingly all 4 of those things are intertwined together. In other words, it's increasingly difficult to make an access control decision without it affecting the smart community decision, which is affecting the voice, video, data infrastructure and negotiations. So it's really trying to find the most cost-effective path for an owner or a community to get where they want to go, given all the demands and given the limited resources. And it's not really the same on any community. It could be, in this development, there might be some of the lessons we've learned and others may help, but every site is unique and every budget is unique. So it's really a matter of trying, I have this amount of money or budget or resources. I have these problems. Given that, what should we do? And then we try to, from a legal, business, and technical perspective, deliver it to them.
Yeah, y'all have got a wide variety of market rates, student housing, luxury, all kinds of different properties that you're putting together solutions for. Being that we're in this COVID world right now, what's changed in your mind? What are developers needing to rethink, and how are some of the amenity spaces going to be changing as a result of COVID and future designs based on what you're seeing today?
It's easy to say things have changed a lot, and I don't really know if they have, but so much with regards to the way the technology solutions we need or how we're deploying things. And the reason I say that is multifamily was trending towards enabling, greater access by third parties. We were looking for, self-guided leasing tours and other streamlined access that, enabled us to de-densify the various processes, being leasing or maintenance or anything else. It really just more put another greater impetus on that. Now, we've had the typical questions about what about automated door openers and a lot of other things, but it comes down to what do we need to do to be able to enable residents or future residents or management to cleanly, with less people, access a property, move about a property, use the amenities and everything else, which we're already working on. It's just, pushed it along a bit.
Go ahead, Trey.
I was just saying, in the spirit of like a lot of companies, I think that you could net out 3 goals: make more money, save money, or create a better experience. How does technology play in the multifamily world? And when you're putting together solutions for properties, if you could say some of the solutions are going to help make this place more marketable, and it's going to help drive up the cost of rents, and we're going to invest in amenities that are going to drive up rents. We're going to invest in technologies that are going to drive down costs. We're going to invest in technologies that are going to create a better customer experience. Talk about how technology impacts those 3 areas, and if there's any technologies in particular that impact those 3 categories specifically.
One of the first people I reported to at JPI was by the name of Frank Schubert, and I still remember a couple lessons he taught me early on. One was, when someone tells me something's cool, that's usually an excuse that they can't quantify it. No one, and the other one was, if it's valuable or it is something you want me to do, you better be able to explain it on a spreadsheet. And in reality, no one should or is going to approve spending money on a new solution unless there's a clear return on investment. Now, that can be reduced cost, it can be additional revenues, greater efficiencies. There are a lot of things to it. Obviously, some of the things we're looking at now that are changing, in particular market rate and luxury multifamily, are managed networks and smart community or IoT. And in every case, in every step, there has to be a positive return on investment justifying those expenses. For IoT, you have 2 sides of it. One is obviously the amenitization of it and the promise of additional rent. The challenge with that is that you have to take all of that with certain skepticism. The reason being is it is very difficult to actually prove a pure rent premium to a single amenity.
Right.
And even if you have significant quantifiable data about what future residents and current residents have said about an amenity, you have to understand that if you're not careful, they will tell you they'll spend $10,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. It's not to say that amenitization and rent premiums aren't valuable, but they're difficult to prove, at least in a quantifiable way other than anecdotal. Savings, or both, be they capital expenses or operating expenses, are easier to quantify. And there are most things that we are looking at, or the things that we try to do on many communities, are things that have not only a rent premium, but also an operational or an asset protection benefit. A thermostat is the perfect example. It's nice that residents can control their thermostat from 10 feet away or 10 miles away. And I'm sure, and there's an amenitization to that, there's a value to that. However, no one's going to spend an extra $100 a unit probably for it.
Right.
Now, it gets really interesting when I say that we can then do diagnostics on your air handler, your condenser, your heat pump, and we can get a couple more years out of those capital expenses. Then it's very easy to justify an additional expense for a thermostat and the network control of it. So everything's a combination of that, but you've got to have a very positive IRR within a narrow window to be able to justify these expenses. Leak detection is one. Leak detection is gaining a lot of ground, predominantly because any change in the deductible or the insurance rate is a significant amount of money given, the cost of insurance for the average multifamily community.
Are you seeing premiums are actually decreasing if people invest in leak detection?
We are beginning to see it's fairly standard now to be able to get a reduction in your deductible. Some of the larger players are beginning able to push through rate deductions, which I expect to filter down. You even see in single family construction, single family homeowners now being able to get deductibles and rent and rate deductions where they're putting in leak detection.
Right.
Same thing is right now they don't necessarily mandate that you have a cutoff valve tied to it, which is a little silly to me, but they'll get around to it eventually.
Sure. Hey, you mentioned IoT being one of the 4 kind of quadrants that y'all work on. What are that notion of the connected apartment or the smart apartment with our attribution to Richard Holtz in memoriam? What are the basics of a smart apartment, and what are some of the more interesting things you've seen as it relates to communities putting together smart apartments?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning Richard. I believe today would have been his birthday.
Richard.
So I had him in mind as well. The 3 basic elements that we see in most communities today are obviously the curb to couch solution, enabling residents, but more importantly, various third parties, be they future residents, your mother-in-law, on-demand deliveries and services like dry cleaning or pet walking, to access the community and get all the way and into the unit, which is difficult considering that generally we want to keep third parties out of our community, and we've designed them that way for the last 30 years. The other one is standard is HVAC thermostat control in the common areas as well as the units. On the resident side, it's amenitization, as we just discussed. On the owner or manager side, it's pure capital protection. As I said, trying to extend the usable lifespan of that equipment. Leak detection is the other big one that we're trying to do wherever we can. Now, very importantly, that is leak detection via a combination of cloud-based analytics on the water meter, as well as leak sensors when a leak would not cause identifiable activity. And these are generally going to be condensation sources or things like, a tanked water heater in the unit. Things that could cause a lot of damage, but would not really, cause the system to notice the leak through the activity.
So without jumping in too much of the weeds, when we talk about leak detection, I've heard you say a couple things so far. There's shut-off valves, there's hot water heaters, there's water in bathrooms and kitchens. In your recommended scenario, talk about what kinds of sensors, if you really wanted a holistic solution.
Yeah, generally, the analytics tied to your Tahama or Inovonics or Next Century water meter gets you good data on flow sources like toilets, sinks, showers, things like that. It's not as immediate as a leak sensor on the floor would be, but it's, within 15 to 30 minutes. And it's very cost effective, obviously, because we already have a water meter there. It's effectively costless if you have the APIs and the analytics. And that is a big if. Leak sensors let me back up. The challenge with leak sensors are, one, they cost money, especially when you're putting one or more in every unit. And secondly, do you really want to put a leak sensor on the floor of a bathroom? I mean, the good question is 12 months later, do you want the resident to take it or do you want it left there? I'm not sure I'm happy with either result. So given the expense of them, also just the lack of practicality, you can't litter a unit with leak sensors. However, if you have known sources that you cannot track with the cloud analytics and API on the water meter, you need a leak sensor. The hot water heater drip pan is the natural one in many developments, but in existing sites in particular, for 12 to 15 years, around 2000, we put air handlers in units without drains for some reason. There are a lot of, older model dishwashers that periodically leak, and their leak sensors make a great deal of sense, particularly when you can locate them so they're not obvious, if not just hidden from the resident.
Right. Okay. How about changing gears? I know we only got a little bit of time left. You talked about another trend was managed network services. Can you talk a little bit further about what that means and what you're seeing today?
Yes, and there are really two parts of this. When we're talking about managed, we're talking about a managed network, usually an Ethernet, though could be fiber to the unit, whereby I have an ultra secure solution that is delivering multiple networks to every unit, every corner of the community. And these are wired and wireless networks, each with their own secure VLAN and everything else. We've had these in student living since 98 or 99. I mean, they're well over 20 years. You've had them to leveling degrees of success in senior living for probably the last 15 years. They've really only hit their stride in multifamily in the last 12 to 18 months. But on their own, just as a way to deliver broadband to a resident, they can deliver a better service at a lower cost while still supporting a double-digit IRR to the owner community than any other deployment mechanism or strategy with regards to broadband today in multifamily. On top of this, you may remember when I first said, one of our goals is to always try to find the most cost-effective way to handle multiple challenges or needs given a limited number of resources or budget. For many developments, as well as many older existing communities, those managed networks are a great example of that. Those managed networks can be used for your entire smart community IoT deployment, not only over Wi-Fi, but Bluetooth, Zigbee, and other standards. They can be used today as a cellular solution that I would argue significantly exceeds your average 4G Lite DOS system, all for less than the cost of the DOS system itself. Not to mention, this is something that has a IRR versus being essentially an expense black hole as DOS systems are. So in many ways, that managed network addresses 3, 4, or even 5 different needs very cost effectively with a positive IRR.
So we're definitely seeing that as a hot trend. I guess I'm also seeing that where a lot of companies were putting in 2 or 3 of their own private networks on a community, they're trying to put in one more enterprise grade. Are you also seeing that people are upgrading like your Wi-Fi backbone to make sure that it can handle the traffic as well as all these multitude of services and security? And I mean, it's hard to take off the shelf kind of lower grade equipment and put an enterprise solution together. Or said differently, does it need to be more of an enterprise solution?
People try it every month. It's getting very interesting as we crunch the numbers. I mean, one of the reasons we never really talked about managed networks and Wi-Fi and market rate or luxury until the last 18 months or so is we forget that less than 30 months ago, what the cost of a 10 gigabit circuit was. only with the bandwidth to the site coming down by well over 85% does it become cost effective. A very interesting corollary of that is increasing speed is not, there's no operating cost difference, or there's very little operating cost difference between a mediocre speed and literally drowning someone in bandwidth. The difference in the user experience and the end user speeds, especially wireless, is more a function of the quality of the underlying equipment than anything else. The wiring's the wiring. And in most of these communities, additional fiber is, you might be talking $5,000 or $10,000 more than they would have to run just to get their own systems running. You're talking about a couple additional Cat 6s to the unit and then the wireless gear, and that's the big difference. There is a reason why 95% of student living is ruckus, and I think that's the same reason you're going to see a very similar breakdown in luxury and market rate as we move forward. I am surprised that ruckus has been able to maintain such a leadership role in providing Wi-Fi and multifamily. In many ways, I wish they had more true competitors in the space, but they just don't today. And I have seen too many competitors fail for me to want to be that guinea pig.
Sure.
Now, I know it's attractive to spend $100,000 less. Everyone wants to do it. But if it doesn't work, you're just paying less money to annoy your residents.
Right. Well, I think the opportunity is more owners need to think a little bit more about the long term, and it for an enterprise grade network. I mean, we're Ruckus fans as well. It's more. It does cost more initially, but it seems to be more robust, and the reliability is there. And there's a lot of people that claim they can hang with them, but we haven't seen that. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. In the future, what's the next biggest technology change coming down the pipe that you see?
There are some technology, and some of these may have some COVID-19 related uses, but there are a number of technologies that I would say looked at. One, we expect another complete turnover of the locking solutions and access control solutions that we use in multifamily within the next 18 months, before the end of 2021, that are going to offer a lot more functionality, in many cases at a much lower cost than what some are paying today for that same functionality. I think you're going to see IoT begin to mutate into energy as well and sustainability, while offering benchmarking opportunities between units and communities and across portfolios. One of the problems I get concerned about is we refer to it as smart communities or IoT, but the actual intelligent devices are only one of maybe 5 components. And I would argue the depth and breadth and depth of APIs that you have as one of these vendors, as well as the strength of your cloud analytics, are just as important as are obviously security and technology. And I think we get a little too caught up in the devices. And then lastly, there isn't a lot of new technology that would make it safer for someone to walk into a community in a time of pandemic out there today. I mean, I actually found a panic bar that when you depress it, actually it will then shine a UV light on the bar for you, which is ridiculous. However, there are a lot of people working on technologies like safe UV and UV air cleaners and other things that could make a lot of our amenity spaces and hallways and everything else a little less risky, that I think will play a part. Regardless of whether or not this is an ongoing problem past this year, I don't think any of us are going to forget it anytime soon.
Sure.
And I think it'll change some behavior. But, the simplest answer today, people ask me all day, do I need I imagine they're asking you, Trey, is, do I need an automated door? Do I need this? Do I do that? And I'm like, have you thought of a copper or brass handle?
Yeah, there's some pretty old school solutions that will work just fine, and then on the same hand, people want a little bit more touchless opportunities, and some of the access controls where you don't have to punch buttons to get into a place, use your smartphone, and have those systems be more integrated. And I know in your specs, you spec a lot of systems where you can use one app and get in the building, get in your unit, get into a lot of common area places without actually having to touch so many things. So I think there's some great techie things to do, and then there's just some common sense things of using materials that can be cleaned easily and aren't going to be materials that hold on to germs so much. So, well, cool. Well, Henry, we have used up our allotted time, and Katie, I'm going to let you take us home.
Well, Henry, thank you so much for, again, sharing your insight with us today. If someone wanted to learn more about you and RealPage, where might they do that?
We're available off the RealPage website, and they're welcome to call myself or any of our team members at any time, and we'll see if we can assist them.
Awesome. And last question, arguably probably the most important question. I thought on your chair in the back that was a blanket, but it's a dog. What is your dog's name?
That is my 90-pound Weimaraner mix Cooper.
Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest and their company, check out the show notes for the relevant links. If you would like to learn more about us here at Symphony, of course, subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel, and don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Symphony Technology Solutions, and on Instagram at Symphony Tech Solutions. Here at Symphony, our ultimate goal is to make harmonious music out of all the technological noise. And we hope today's episode helped in doing just that. See you next time.